From the earliest times in man's history, gems and precious stones have been held in great esteem. They have been found in the monuments of prehistoric peoples, and not alone in the civilization of the pharaohs, of the Incas, or of the Montezumas invested these brilliant things from nature's jewel casket with the significance beyond the mere suggestion of their intrinsic properties. The Magi, the wise men, the seers, the astrologers of the ages gone by found much in the matter of gems that we have nearly come to forgetting. With them, each gem possessed certain planetary attractions peculiar to itself, certain affinities with the various virtues, and a zodiacal concordance with the seasons of the year. Moreover, these early sages were firm believers in the influence of gems in one's nativity, that the evil in the world could be kept from contaminating a child properly protected by wearing the appropriate talismanic, natal, and zodiacal gems. Indeed, folklorists are wont to wonder whether the custom of wearing gems in jewelry did not originate in the talismanic idea instead of in the idea of mere additional adornment. The influence exerted by precious stones was assumed in medieval times without question, but when the spirit of investigation was aroused in the Renaissance period, an effort was made to find a reason of some sort for the traditional beliefs. Strange as it may seem to us, there was little disposition to doubt that the influence existed. This was taken for granted, and all the mental effort expended was devoted in finding some plausible explanation as to how precious stones became endowed with their strange and mystic virtues, and how these virtues acted in modifying the character, health, or fortunes of the wearer. When the existence of miracles is acknowledged, there will always be a tendency to regard every singular and unaccountable happening as a miracle, that is to say, as something that occurs outside of, or in spite of, the laws of nature. We even observe this tendency at work in our own time. As regards visual impressions, for instance, if a child of lively imagination enters a half-lighted room and sees a bundle of clothes lying in a corner, the indistinct outline of this mass may be transferred to his mind in the form of a wild animal. The child does not really see an animal, but his fear has given a definite outline and character to the indefinite image printed on the retina. The writer has always sought to investigate anything strange and apparently unaccountable which has been brought to his notice, but he can truly say that he has never found the slightest evidence of anything transcending the acknowledged laws of nature. Still, when we consider the marvelous secrets that have been revealed to us by science, and the yet more wonderful things that will be revealed to us in the future, we are tempted to think that there may be something in the old beliefs, some residuum of fact, susceptible indeed of explanation, but very different from what a crass skepticism supposes it to be. Above all, the results of the investigations now pursued in relation to the group of phenomena embraced under the designation of telepathy, the subconscious influence of one's mind over the absent or distant mind, and the wireless transmission of power in wireless telegraphy and telephony, may go far to make us hesitant before condemning as utterly preposterous many of the tales of enchantment and magical influence. If the unconscious will of one individual can affect the thoughts and feelings of another individual at a great distance and without the intervention of any known means of communication, as is confidently asserted by many competent investigators in the domain of telepathy, their claims being supported by many strange happenings, perhaps the result of coincidence, but possibly due to the operation of some unknown law. Does that not give a color of variety to the statements regarding the ancient magicians and their spells? Autosuggestion may also afford an explanation of much that is mysterious in the effects attributed to precious stones. For if the wearer be firmly convinced that the gem he is wearing produces certain results, this conviction will impress itself upon his thought and hence upon his very organism. He will really experience the influence, and the effects will manifest themselves just as powerfully as though they were caused by vibrations or emanations from the material body of the stone. All this may serve to explain the persistence of the belief in magic arts. A few hundred years ago, a Hungarian woman was accused of having murdered 200 or 300 young girls, and at her trial she confessed that her object was to use the blood of her victims to renew her youth and beauty, for the blood of innocent virgins was supposed to have wonderful properties. In some parts of England today there is a superstitious belief that an article of clothing worn by a person, or anything he has habitually used, absorbs a portion of his individuality. Therefore, it sometimes happens that a handkerchief, for instance, will be stolen and pinned down beneath the waters of a stream on a toad, the pins marking the name of the enemy, the belief being that this cloth wasted away, so will the body of him who had worn it. In medieval and later times, this was a common practice of the sorcerers, although they frequently composed a wax figure rudely resembling the person against whom the spell was directed, and then thrust pins into this figure or allowed it to melt away before a slow fire. The enchantment of the sorcerer was supposed to have caused some essence of the personality to enter into the image, and therefore the living and breathing being felt sympathetically the effects of the ill treatment inflicted upon its counterfeit. The persistence of the most cruel and unnatural practices of the old-time sorcery is illustrated by the fact that only a few years ago, in the island of Cuba, 3 women were condemned to death for murdering a white baby so as to use the heart and blood as a cure for diseases. 4 other women were sentenced to from 14 to 20 years imprisonment as accomplices. When such things happen in Cuba, it is not surprising that in half-civilized Haiti similar crimes are committed. Here the voodoo priest and priestesses, papalos and mamalos, papa kings and mama queens, require from time to time a human sacrifice to appease their serpent god. One strange case is related where a stupefying potion inducing a state of apparent death was secretly administered to a sick man. When the attending physician pronounced him dead, he was duly interred, but 2 days after, the grave was found open and the body had disappeared. The voodoo worshippers had carried the man away as to revive him and then sacrifice him at their fearful rites. In a poem addressed to Marguerite de Velos, La Marguerite des Marguerites, as she was called, by Jean de la Taille d'Abanderoy, we read of the diamond that it came from gold and from the sun, but we are told that not only are precious stones endowed with life, they also are subject to disease, old age, and death. They even take offense if an injury be done to them, and become rough and pale. The sickness of the pearl had been a theme for centuries, and in many cases is also fancied. It is but a subterfuge or deception for a lady to remark that her pearls have sickened. By referring to this sickness, her friends are naturally led to believe that at one time her pearls were fine, perfect ones, when in reality they may never have been so. The opinion given in 1609 by Anselmus de Boot, court physician to Rudolph II of Germany, regarding the power inherent in certain precious stones, embodies the ideas on this subject held by many of the enlightened minds of that period. The supernatural enacting cause is God, the good angel and the evil one, the good by the will of God and the evil by his permission. What God can do by himself, he could do also by the means of ministers, good and bad angels, who, by special grace of God and for the preservation of men, are enabled to enter precious stones and to guard men from dangers or procure some special grace for them. However, as we may not affirm anything positive touching the presence of angels in gems, to repose trust in them, or to ascribe undue powers to them, is more especially pleasing to the spirit of evil, who transforms himself into an angel of light, steals into the substance of the little gem, and works such wonders by it that some people do not place their trust in God but in the gem, and seek to obtain it what they should ask of God alone. Thus it is perhaps the spirit of evil which exercises its power on us through the turquoise, teaching us little by little that safety is not to be sought from God but from the gem. In the next chapter of his work, De Boot, while extolling the remedial power of a certain group of stones, insists upon the falsity of many of the superstitions regarding these objects. That gems or stones, when applied to the body, exert an action upon it, is so well proven by the experience of many persons, that anyone who doubts this must be called overbold. We have proof of this power in the carnelian, the hematite, and the jasper, all of which, when applied, check hemorrhage. However, it is very necessary to observe that many virtues not possessed by gems are falsely ascribed to them. Paracelsus, the gifted and brilliant thinker, scientist, and, we must properly add, charlatan of the 16th century, whose really extraordinary mental endowment was largely wasted in the effort to impress his followers with the idea that he had a mystic control over supernatural agencies, was the owner of the talismanic jewel which he asserted to be the dwelling place of a powerful spirit named Azat. Some old portraits of the philosopher, or pseudo-philosopher, figure him wearing this jewel, in whose virtues we may fairly doubt that he himself believed, but which furnished a part of the paraphernalia he freely employed to gain influence over the credulous. The following passage from the faithful lapidary of Thomas Nichols, who wrote in the middle of the 17th century, illustrates the prevailing opinion in England at that time as to the virtues of precious stones. Perfectium effectus concinere in causa. But it cannot truly be so spoken of gems and precious stones, the efforts of which by Lapidus are said to be the making of rich men and eloquent, to preserve men from thunder and lightning, from plagues and diseases, to move dreams, to procure sleep, to foretell things to come, to make men wise, to strengthen memory, to procure honors, to hinder fascinations and witchcrafts, to hinder slothfulness, to put courage into men, to keep men chaste, to increase friendship, to hinder difference and dissension, and to make men invisible, as is feigned by the poet concerning Gaius Ring, and affirmed by Albertus and others concerning the Ophthalmus Lapis. And many other strange things are affirmed to them and ascribed to them, which are contrary to the nature of gems, in which they, as they are material, mixed, inanimate bodies neither nor can affect by the properties and facilities of their own constitutions, because they, being natural causes, can produce none other but natural effects, such as are all the ordinary effects of gems, that is, such effects as flow from their elementary matter, from their temper, form, and essence, such as are the operations of hot and cold, and of all the first qualities, and all such accidents as do arise from the commixation of the first qualities, such as are hardness, heaviness, thickness, color, and taste. These are all the natural faculties of gems, and these are the known effects of the union of their matter, and of the operation of the first qualities one upon another. The long continued concentration of vision on the objects tends to produce a partial paralysis of certain functions of the brain. This effect may be noted in the helplessness of a bird when its gaze is fixed upon the glittering eyes of a serpent, or in the unwilling obedience yielded by a lion or some other wild animal when forced to look into the intent eyes of its trainer. In the same way, those who gaze for a long time without interruption on a crystal or glass ball, on an opal, a moonstone, a sapphire, or a cat's eye, may become partially hypnotized or even fall into a profound sleep. The condition induced, whether it be that of semi-trance or hypnotism, or simply due to the imaginative workings of the brain, is believed to give an insight into the future. This hypnotic effect is probably caused by some gleam or point of light in the stone, attracting and fixing the beholder's gaze. The moonstone, the star sapphire, and the cat's eye are all gems which possess a moving light, a moving line, or 3 cross lines, and they are believed by the Orientals to be gems of good luck. Indeed, it is supposed in the East that the living spirit dwells within these stones, a spirit potent for good. Superstitions fancies bear the same relation to truth that the shadow of the form does to the form itself. We know that the shadow has no substantial existence, and yet we know equally well that it is cast by the same real body. In the same way, we may be sure that, however foolish a superstition may appear to be, it has some foundation in fact. Indeed, superstition is associated with the highest attribute of the human mind, imagination. The realities about us gain much of their charm from sentiment, and all that is great in art and literature owes its being in the transforming energy of pure imagination. Morbid imagination, on the other hand, distorts and degrades the impression it receives and produces only unlovely or ignorable forms and ideas. Sentiment may best be expressed as a feeling of one who, on a warm summer's day, is rowing along a shady brook or resting in some sylvan dell, with nothing to interfere with his tranquil mood or nothing to spur him to action. Thus he has only suggestions of hope and indulges in rosy views of life. Reality, on the other hand, may be likened to a crisp winter's morning which is filled with exhilaration, conscious of the tingle of the cold, but comfortable in the knowledge of wearing a tightly buttoned garment which will afford protection should the elements become disturbing. Superstition, lastly, can be said to resemble a dark, cold, misty night when the moon is throwing malevolent shadows which are weird and distorted, while the cold seems to seize one by the throat and arouse a passionate desire to free oneself from its grip in some way, to change a horrible nightmare into a pleasant dream.